The walls are closing in on one of hip-hop's most powerful figures. Inside a federal courtroom brimming with tension and silence, Sean "Diddy" Combs is no longer the untouchable mogul behind platinum hits and billion-dollar ventures. He's now the central figure in one of the most explosive celebrity trials of the decade. What started as whispers, rumors buried under NDAs and fear, has now erupted into a public spectacle. And every new testimony is more jaw-dropping than the last. From Cassie's tearful accusations to secret recordings, mysterious medicine bags, and shocking claims of sex games involving masked figures and surveillance footage, this isn't just a scandal, it's a collapse. Former assistants, close friends, and even family members are breaking their silence under oath, revealing a lifestyle built on fear, control, and secrecy. Prosecutors are painting a chilling picture of a man who allegedly ruled his world with intimidation, manipulation, and unimaginable power plays, where silence was currency and defiance came with a price. And while Cassie has stepped down from the witness stand, her voice echoes louder than ever through those she left behind. Every detail, from drug-fueled parties to dark threats of violence, is being laid bare, and the world is watching it all unfold. The question is no longer whether Diddy will be remembered as a music icon. It's whether the empire he built will survive the fallout of the truth. The tension in the courtroom snapped like a live wire as Don Richard, former member of Danity Kane and Diddy Dirty Money, took the stand. What followed was nothing short of explosive. With the eyes of the industry and the public on her, Don testified that not only was Diddy fully aware of the abuse Cassie endured, but he went out of his way to silence anyone who dared to speak up. She recounted the aftermath of the now infamous 2009 incident, where Diddy allegedly struck Cassie with a skillet. According to Don, he told her the next day that Cassie was fine, before chillingly adding that people could go missing if anyone talked. When asked what she thought he meant, Don didn't hesitate. "We could die." That statement sucked the air out of the room. Jurors sat frozen, the gallery wide-eyed. It wasn't just the words, it was the weight behind them. Dawn was no longer just a former bandmate. She had become a whistleblower, risking everything to expose what she described as a pattern of fear and manipulation behind the scenes. Her testimony was a gut punch, one that painted Diddy not as a careless celebrity, but as a man capable of weaponizing silence and wielding fear like a tool of control. But Diddy's legal team didn't flinch. They launched a fierce counterattack, challenging the reliability of her memory and the timing of her claims. Why had she waited until just a week ago to mention the death threat? Why did her civil lawsuit, filed months earlier, contain nearly identical language to her courtroom statements? Defense attorneys accused her of rehearsing the script, of reshaping facts to fit a damaging narrative. Yet even under fire, Dawn held her ground, insisting that trauma doesn't follow a timeline, and that she was speaking her truth. Still, the damage had been done. Her testimony set the tone for the day, framing Diddy not just as an alleged abuser, but as someone who maintained control through coercion and veiled threats. Whether or not her words were enough to sway the jury, one thing was clear. The courtroom was no longer a place of neutral facts. It had become a battlefield of fear, memory, and power, and Don Richard had just fired the first shot. If Don Richard's testimony shook the room, Carrie Morgan's plunged it into silence. As Cassie's best friend for nearly 2 decades, Carrie wasn't just a bystander. She was a first-hand witness to one of the most terrifying chapters in Cassie's life. In front of the jury, she recalled a chilling night where Cassie's then-boyfriend, described as a wealthy and powerful man, suddenly turned violent. Carrie testified that Cassie was shoved to the ground, her skull slamming into a brick with such force that she lost consciousness. When she awoke, dazed and barefoot, she ran into the darkness, through trees and brush, until she collapsed, hiding in a ditch, too afraid to speak. The courtroom listened, spellbound, as Carrie painted the picture of finding her friend alone in the woods, trembling and whispering in fear. It was the kind of story that sounds scripted, except this wasn't fiction. This was sworn testimony under penalty of perjury. The moment felt raw, real, and unforgettable. For many watching, it humanized Cassie in a way headlines never could. This wasn't just about lawsuits and scandal anymore. It was about survival. But the defense, relentless in its mission to cast doubt, zeroed in on inconsistencies. Carrie had initially told prosecutors that Cassie was taken to the hospital after the attack. Now, on the stand, she said it was urgent care. The defense attorney seized the moment, framing it as a red flag. Was this simply a memory lapse? Or had someone coached her to adjust the facts for a more palatable courtroom narrative? In a trial where credibility is everything, even the smallest crack in memory can be weaponized. Still, despite the pressure, the emotional weight of Carrie's story lingered in the room. The image of a young woman bloodied and hiding in the woods was impossible to shake. Even if her recollections weren't perfect, the fear was real. And that fear, raw, vulnerable, and undeniable, might be more powerful than any cross-examination. As prosecutors continue to weave Cassie's narrative through witness after witness, the emotional mosaic is becoming harder to ignore. The jury may question the timeline, but they can't unsee the terror. If there was ever a moment the courtroom gasped in disbelief, it came when David James, Diddy's former personal assistant, stepped back onto the witness stand. Calm, detailed, and disturbingly matter-of-fact, James described a hidden world masked by fame and luxury, a world fueled not by creativity and music, but by pills, fear, and control. He testified about a medicine bag that Diddy traveled with, no ordinary toiletry kit, but a velvet-lined Louis Vuitton pouch crammed with more than 35 pill bottles. Some were prescription, many weren't. He listed painkillers, Viagra, diet pills, and even sperm enhancers. And then came the detail that stunned the room. Some of the pills, James claimed, had the face of President Obama stamped on them. It wasn't a joke. It was evidence, documented, cataloged, and seized by Homeland Security when Diddy's hotel room was raided in September. James admitted he used his own credit card to buy many of the drugs and items, from over-the-counter meds to illegal substances. Bad Boy Entertainment would reimburse him later. But this wasn't just a celebrity living large, it was a system, a routine, and one James said he had no choice but to maintain. He wasn't just an assistant. He was a handler, a fixer, and a shield between Diddy and the outside world. James painted a detailed picture of how his daily duties revolved around managing chaos. He was responsible for everything from stocking Diddy's hotel rooms with Fiji water and applesauce to ensuring Cassie had food delivered while recovering in secret. According to James, Diddy insisted she stay holed up in the London hotel after an alleged violent encounter in a car, an incident Cassie herself referenced in earlier testimony. When James arrived expecting to find her alone, he was greeted by another staffer. It was a red flag, but he knew better than to ask questions. As he told the court, "I wasn't hired to get involved in personal matters. I was hired to obey." But it wasn't just about logistics. James also testified that Diddy maintained a near-paranoid level of control. He said Diddy once reviewed party footage and confronted him about dancing too much. When James admitted it was him, Diddy allegedly responded, "I'm going to keep that video in case I ever need it." The implication was clear. Everything was recorded, and everything could be used later. In Diddy's world, control wasn't just exercised physically or emotionally. It was archived, stored, and ready to be weaponized. He described nights where he was sent out to fetch drugs, Percocets, ecstasy, whatever Diddy needed. Sometimes the prescriptions were filled in James's name. Other times he was sent to meet unnamed contacts. When asked why he never refused, James didn't flinch. "Because I needed to keep my job," he said. That fear, the silent pressure of working for someone with immense power and influence, echoed through his every word. His testimony gave the prosecution one of its most damning narratives yet. That Diddy's empire wasn't just built on celebrity. It was maintained through a carefully choreographed mix of fear, drugs, and control. James's account didn't just expose Diddy's private habits. It cracked open the illusion of untouchability. This wasn't a rogue celebrity dabbling in excess. This was an orchestrated system operating in plain sight, sustained by staff who knew their role was to keep the chaos hidden. Whether the jury believed every detail or not, the picture was clear. Behind the lights, the awards, and the red carpets, there was a hidden machine at work. And David James had just given everyone a guided tour inside. If there was any doubt that Diddy's empire extended beyond music and business, David James swiftly shattered it with a chilling revelation. Everything was recorded. Not just for posterity, but for power. He testified that Diddy secretly filmed parties, capturing not just the wild nights but the faces and actions of everyone present. James recalled a specific moment when Diddy confronted him after reviewing footage, smirking as he said, "I'm keeping that video in case I ever need it." It wasn't about fun. It was a warning. In Diddy's world, cameras weren't for memories. They were for leverage. The courtroom fell into a heavy silence. It wasn't just voyeurism, it was surveillance with intent. Every guest, every staffer, even the closest allies were potential pawns in an unspoken insurance policy. James hinted that this pattern wasn't isolated. It was consistent, calculated, a system designed to protect one man's image while leaving everyone else vulnerable. He didn't elaborate on what was done with the footage, but the implication lingered. Anyone could be silenced with the right clip. Beyond the cameras, James recounted unsettling encounters involving Cassie's isolated hotel stays. After one alleged assault, she was reportedly told to recover quietly at the London hotel. Ames was tasked with delivering food, setting up her room, and managing logistics. But on one visit, something felt off. He knocked, expecting Cassie to answer, but was greeted by another staff member instead. The energy was tense. He didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. Another time, he walked into her suite and saw her on the bed, motionless, distant, as a man slipped away into the shadows. The shower ran in the background. The scene, though subtle, screamed of something deeper. James admitted he was afraid, not just of losing his job, but of what he might see, or worse, become responsible for. He was asked to pick up prescriptions, some of them under his own name, and hand off items with no explanation. Some days, he said, it felt like he was moving through a movie set, one where he was both cast and crew, but never the director. He played his part, silently. In those testimonies, the prosecution began weaving a narrative not just about abuse or addiction, but about absolute control. Diddy wasn't portrayed as reckless or erratic. He was shown as methodical, intentional, a man who orchestrated every moment of his life, even the darkest ones, with an eye toward maintaining dominance. Whether it was video footage, controlled isolation, or silent compliance, every move seemed designed to protect his empire at any cost. And for those on the inside, like James, the cost was fear. Fear of asking the wrong question, fear of being caught on the wrong tape, fear of becoming the next scapegoat. By the end of his testimony, it was no longer just about what happened behind closed doors. It was about the layers of silence wrapped around those events, layers maintained by obedience, secrecy, and surveillance. Just when the courtroom seemed to have absorbed the worst, it took an unexpected, deeply unsettling turn. Sheree Hayes, an exotic dancer professionally known as the Punisher, took the stand and delivered a testimony that left the room stunned. Unlike previous witnesses who focused on verbal threats or physical violence, Hayes recounted an orchestrated world of erotic performances, intimate sessions curated like theatrical productions. He testified that he was contacted multiple times to provide private entertainment for Diddy and Cassie. The requests came late, often around midnight, and always included specific, unusual instructions. According to Hayes, these weren't casual encounters. They were premeditated. He described arriving at locations like Trump Tower and being led into dimly lit suites where candles flickered, bowls of oil lined the furniture, and an eerie silence filled the room. Cassie would greet him in a bathrobe while Diddy remained hidden, sometimes behind curtains, other times behind a mask that revealed only his eyes. Hayes was instructed not to speak or make eye contact with the music mogul. The atmosphere, he claimed, felt more like a ritual than a rendezvous. The dancer testified that Diddy often acted as a director, giving verbal commands from the shadows. Move slower. Touch there. Step back. Hayes said stacks of cash were routinely handed over during the sessions, sometimes before, sometimes after. But the mood was always tense, as if any wrong move could lead to consequences. He emphasized that while some performances were one-on-one with Cassie, others involved Diddy observing, issuing instructions, or simply watching in silence. These weren't consensual experiences between equals, he implied. They were controlled, choreographed spectacles. Hayes admitted he's currently working on a memoir, but firmly stated that his courtroom claims weren't embellished for attention. He said he had bank records, text confirmations, and digital receipts proving the sessions took place over several years. One moment in particular stood out. He recalled being told by Cassie that it was a special occasion, and she had chosen him specifically. That moment, he said, made him realize this wasn't about fantasy. It was about domination masked as intimacy. He walked away feeling more like a pawn than a performer. Even more disturbing was Hayes' description of the emotional toll these encounters left behind. He confessed to feeling ashamed after several sessions, especially when Diddy threw condoms on the couch mid-performance or made crude remarks. Hayes said there were times he couldn't perform due to the psychological pressure, only to be dismissed shortly after with partial pay and a vague warning about being better next time. For the jury, this testimony added a deeply uncomfortable layer to the already disturbing narrative, highlighting not just exploitation, but a pattern of psychological manipulation. By the time Hayes stepped down, the courtroom atmosphere had changed. His account wasn't about celebrity excess, it was about control, power, and the performance of dominance behind closed doors. What may have once looked like luxury and kink now carried the stench of coercion. And if his story proved one thing, it was that the abuse Cassie described wasn't limited to rage-filled moments. It extended into calculated rituals, crafted to strip away autonomy, layer by layer. When Regina Ventura took the stand, the courtroom shifted from scandal to heartbreak. As the mother of Cassie Ventura, she wasn't there to offer speculation or secondhand gossip. She came armed with evidence. In her hands were photos documenting bruises, bank statements tracing questionable transactions, and messages from a daughter desperate to escape. It was December 2011, she recalled, when Cassie fled Los Angeles and returned home to Connecticut, shaken, bruised, and terrified. According to Regina, that's when Sean Diddy Combs demanded $20,000 in restitution, claiming he had invested that much in Cassie and now wanted reimbursement for his loss. Her voice didn't tremble, but the weight of her words was felt in every corner of the room. Regina testified that she and her husband took out a loan to cover the demand, terrified of what could happen if they refused. It wasn't about money, she said. It was about control. The implication was crystal clear. Diddy wasn't just trying to recover expenses, he was reinforcing his dominance, even after the relationship had ended. To many in the courtroom, it sounded more like extortion than a breakup. But the story didn't stop there. Regina described a string of disturbing incidents that followed. She said Diddy once stole Cassie's phone during an argument and sped off in her car, a Jaguar, leaving her stranded. Another time, outside Cassie's apartment building, tensions boiled over during a confrontation where Diddy's head of security allegedly stepped between the couple and Regina, physically blocking the mother from reaching her daughter. That wasn't just a moment of conflict, it was a clear message. She was no longer in control of her child's safety. Her testimony added new layers to the prosecution's case. Unlike the emotional trauma relayed by other witnesses, Regina's account introduced financial manipulation, property disputes, and a growing sense of fear among those closest to Cassie. And unlike other witnesses, she didn't waver. Her demeanor was calm, almost clinical, like a mother who had rehearsed these memories for years, waiting for the moment someone would finally listen. That quiet strength gave her testimony credibility that resonated far beyond the facts alone. She also detailed a message Cassie sent her in late 2011, describing threats that involved not only herself, but also her new partner, rapper Kid Cudi. Cassie allegedly told her mother that Diddy had threatened to release explicit footage and go after both of them. At the time, Regina said she believed the threat was serious enough to warrant police involvement, but they didn't know who to trust. The fear wasn't just about retaliation. It was about how far Diddy might go to silence her daughter, even from a distance. By the time Regina stepped down, she had done more than testify. She had painted a portrait of a mother trapped in a nightmare with no way out. Her words weren't dramatic, but they carried undeniable emotional gravity. This wasn't a public feud between celebrities. It was a private war fought behind closed doors, where fear, silence, and power dictated every decision. And for Cassie, The escape wasn't just physical, it was financial, emotional, and spiritual. Regina's testimony made it clear. The cost of leaving wasn't just hers to bear. It was her family's too. The courtroom tensed as Special Agent Gerald Gannon took the stand, his presence alone signaling a shift from emotional testimony to federal urgency. Representing Homeland Security's Sex and Labor Trafficking Unit in Miami, Gannon detailed what had become one of the most aggressive law enforcement actions tied to the case. In September 2024, with reports that Sean Diddy Combs was preparing to leave the country, authorities executed a surprise raid on his exclusive Star Island estate. The mission wasn't just to gather evidence, it was to prevent a possible escape. The agents didn't knock. They broke through the gates, citing concerns that individuals inside the property might destroy crucial items or pose a threat to federal officers. What they found inside didn't just corroborate Cassie's allegations, it shocked even seasoned investigators. Among the discoveries, a disassembled AR-15-style rifle, multiple fully loaded magazines, stacks of ammunition, and a collection of sex paraphernalia. Gannon emphasized that the rifle's serial number had been deliberately removed, a telltale sign of someone attempting to prevent the weapon from being traced. But it wasn't just the weapon that raised eyebrows, it was the context. According to Agent Gannon, the floor plans, photos, and evidence collected all pointed to a lifestyle that appeared carefully curated, yet deeply disturbing. 7-inch stiletto heels sat alongside military-grade magazines. Bottles of lubricant, custom restraints, and electronic surveillance tools were cataloged and presented as exhibits. Taken separately, they may have seemed unremarkable. Together, they painted a dark portrait of control, indulgence, and power unchecked. What made the testimony even more damning was the level of preparation evident in the property's layout. Gannon described dedicated spaces that seemed purpose-built for privacy and secrecy. Hidden doors, blacked-out windows, and security cameras covering every angle suggested a man not just living lavishly, but one prepared to monitor and isolate anyone who entered his world. Prosecutors suggested this environment enabled the very coercion and manipulation witnesses had described all week. The urgency behind the raid, Gannon confirmed, came after federal agents learned of an alleged plan by Combs to fly his family overseas on a private jet. With multiple lawsuits and criminal probes mounting, authorities feared he might disappear before critical evidence could be secured. That fear proved valid when agents seized suitcases, encrypted devices, and other personal items from the property, some of which are still being analyzed for potential connections to broader federal investigations. Agent Gannon's testimony didn't rely on emotion. It didn't have to. The physical evidence, photographed, bagged, and sworn into the record, spoke volumes. His account suggested that what lay behind the gates of Star Island wasn't just opulence or eccentricity, it was a fortress, a place built to shield secrets, protect the powerful, and silence anyone who might speak out. As the jury stared at the photos of weapons and restraints projected on the courtroom screen, it became painfully clear. This trial wasn't just about past trauma. It was about uncovering the hidden infrastructure that enabled it. Section 8, the return of David James and the Suge Knight story. When David James re-entered the courtroom, no one expected what came next. His previous testimonies had already exposed the inner workings of Sean Diddy Combs' secretive lifestyle: drug management, surveillance tactics, silent obedience. But this time, James introduced something even more dangerous: a brush with real-world violence. What he described wasn't a party or hotel run. It was an encounter that unfolded like a scene ripped from a gangster film, and it centered around another controversial figure in hip-hop, Suge Knight. James recalled a seemingly mundane errand, picking up cheeseburgers at Mel's Diner. But what started as a late-night food run quickly escalated into something more sinister. Diddy, seated in a silver Navigator, suddenly spotted Suge Knight across the parking lot. James testified that the tension was immediate. According to him, black SUVs surrounded the area within minutes. Then, he claimed, he saw someone discreetly hand Suge a firearm. The energy shifted from coincidence to confrontation. Everyone in the car knew what that meant. According to James, Diddy didn't flinch. Instead, he calmly stepped out and approached Suge, allegedly identifying himself as Biggie's boy. It was a calculated move, one meant to signal respect or perhaps diffuse a threat. Whatever the intent, the situation intensified. James said they left the diner quickly, but the drama didn't end there. When they returned to the house, he found Cassie inside, hysterical. She was crying and pleading with Diddy not to go back out. Then came the chilling detail. Diddy climbed into another vehicle, this time with 3 visible guns on his lap. The courtroom hung on every word. James didn't dramatize the moment. He delivered it with a calm clarity that made it all the more unsettling. He admitted he didn't ask questions. He didn't feel he had the right. When asked if he feared for his life, he replied that fear was constant. This wasn't just a story of celebrity excess. It was one of intimidation and latent danger. What he witnessed wasn't just a powerful man acting recklessly. It was someone operating with the assurance that no one would dare challenge him. Prosecutors used the story to reinforce a central theme in their case. Diddy didn't simply control people through fame or money. He controlled them through fear. The weapons, the SUVs, the calculated calm in a high-stakes encounter, they painted a portrait not of a man reacting, but of one prepared for war. And for those closest to him, like James, silence wasn't just preferred, it was required. The risks of defiance were too high, the consequences too real. By the time James left the stand, it was clear his testimony had shifted the trial's tone once again. The courtroom was no longer just grappling with whispered threats or private rituals, it was confronting the very real possibility of violence. Diddy wasn't just a mogul navigating lawsuits and image rehab. He was now being portrayed as someone deeply embedded in a culture of dominance, where loyalty was demanded, and resistance could be deadly. And for the jury, that revelation might be impossible to forget. Just when it seemed the trial couldn't get any more explosive, the courtroom was rocked by a legal twist no one saw coming. Clayton Howard, a man allegedly entangled in intimate scenarios with both Sean Diddy Combs and Cassie Ventura, became the focus of a surprise subpoena. Howard reportedly held a private journal chronicling his experiences with the couple over several years. This wasn't gossip or hearsay, it was a written account, allegedly filled with raw, unfiltered reflections. And now the defense wanted it all. Howard's attorney moved quickly, filing a motion to block the request. He argued the journal contained privileged, potentially protected information, materials tied to a future lawsuit or legal strategy. But the judge wasn't persuaded. After reviewing the motion and assessing the contents privately, the court ruled that the documents did not qualify for legal protection. The verdict was clear. The journal must be handed over immediately. That ruling changed the trajectory of the trial almost instantly. According to insiders familiar with the journal, its contents may complicate the prosecution's narrative. While the bulk of the case has portrayed Cassie as a victim of systemic abuse and manipulation, the entries allegedly suggest that not every encounter was forced. Some excerpts, sources claim, point to moments of apparent consent, blurred lines, or participation under unclear circumstances. If those pages hold up under scrutiny, Diddy's team could argue that Cassie's testimony omitted key context, potentially shaking the credibility of her entire case. Still, legal experts warn that nuance doesn't equal innocence. In abusive power dynamics, perceived consent can often mask coercion, especially when financial dependency, emotional pressure, or fear are involved. Just because someone didn't say no doesn't mean they had the freedom to say it. Prosecutors are expected to make that distinction clear, emphasizing the imbalance that existed between Cassie and the music mogul. The journal might offer details, but it won't erase the pattern witnesses have described across the last several days. What the document does reveal, though, is how complicated truth can become in relationships built on imbalance. Memory, loyalty, and survival often warp under pressure. And when someone holds as much influence as Diddy allegedly did, even written words can become unreliable. The journal may help the defense, but it also raises a deeper question. How do we separate reality from survival instinct when the stakes are life, career, or safety? As the journal is now officially in the court's hands, its impact remains to be seen. Will it dismantle parts of Cassie's narrative, or simply confirm the complexities of her experience? Either way, the stage is set for a final act where everything is on the line. In the end, this trial may not be about proving a single version of truth, but about exposing how power can twist it, bury it, and weaponize it to serve those who wield it best. What began as whispers behind velvet ropes has now erupted into a public reckoning in a federal courtroom. Witness after witness, former assistants, longtime friends, family members, and even alleged participants in Diddy's inner circle have stripped away the curated image of a charismatic mogul. In its place, a portrait painted in secrecy, fear, and disturbing control. The evidence isn't just emotional, it's physical. From hidden surveillance tapes and drug-fueled hotel rituals to threats of death and military-grade firearms, the narrative unfolding goes far beyond celebrity drama. It's a story of unchecked power, finally being challenged under oath. As Cassie's name echoes across sworn testimonies, the spotlight has shifted from music and accolades to coercion, manipulation, and exploitation. Her story, once locked in silence, now anchors a broader conversation about what happens when fame becomes a shield and money a weapon. The trial has exposed more than personal misconduct. It's peeled back the structure of an empire built on loyalty, enforced by fear, and boundaries crossed without consequence. Each testimony chips away at the myth, daring the public to see Diddy not as a titan, but as a man whose influence may have enabled something far more sinister. And so, the world watches, waiting. Is this where justice finally catches up to power? Or will legal maneuvers and star-studded defenses bury the truth once more? The outcome remains uncertain, but one thing is clear. This case is no longer just about Sean Combs. It's about accountability in an industry that has too often looked away. And as the proceedings continue, one question lingers louder than ever. What happens when the music stops and all that's left is the truth?